Howdy, folks. Welcome to Panel Pursuit, where stories come to life. Let's dive in. The scene shifts. 2 years had quietly slipped past since Arthur, now shrouded under the alias note, had boldly turned away from relying solely on magic, choosing instead to sharpen his swordsmanship. Word of a masked swordsman who effortlessly cleared dungeons solo had erupted like a viral YouTube clip at the local Adventurers Guild. Whispers swirled through crowded taverns and guild halls. One grizzled veteran recounted teaming up with a mysterious figure who traveled alongside none other than Jasmine. The only detail he offered was the shocker. The boy wasn't a mage. In a world dominated by magic like how social media dominates our lives today, watching someone smash through trials without a single spell was like seeing a speedrunner shatter records with a dance pad. Unexpected, awe-inspiring, and borderline unbelievable. Jasmine's presence added fuel to the fire. Some claimed she was the real secret weapon behind the swordsman's success, like a genius streamer's hidden strategy guide. Meanwhile, Termin, a hulking brute who looked like he binge-watched every Marvel movie while guzzling energy drinks, cracked his knuckles with the swagger of a UFC champ. "I'm ready to take down this masked kid and claim the spotlight," he boomed, his voice echoing like a stadium announcer hyping the main event. Arthur, cool and collected like a gamer dodging trolls in a live chat, simply brushed past Termin, ignoring his roar like it was background noise on a busy subway. That subtle snub was all it took. Termin, fueled by pride and a touch of desperation, swung wildly, throwing punches like a player spamming buttons hoping for a lucky hit. But Arthur moved like a dancer in sync with his favorite synthwave playlist, fluid, precise, untouchable. A storm brewed in Arthur's eyes. Wind crackled around Termin's blade as the brute infused it with tempestuous magic, whipping up a whirlwind of attacks. But Arthur flowed through the chaos like a pro in a parkour video, graceful, calculated, untouchable. Then came the moment that dropped jaws like a cliffhanger in a Netflix thriller. Arthur's blade sliced through Termin's hand with surgical precision, severing 3 fingers in a single lightning-fast strike. The hall fell silent, shock rippling through the crowd like a glitch in a matrix. Termin collapsed, clutching his ruined hand, eyes wide with disbelief and panic. The air thickened, charged with tension. Arthur's presence was that of a final boss in a video game, untouchable, commanding respect without uttering a word. His mere gaze stilled the murmurs, silenced the restless crowd. Without a hint of arrogance, he sank into his seat, the calm after the storm. Needing to refuel from this battle, Arthur summoned a waitress and ordered a hefty sack of rations, because even legends can't run on hype and adrenaline alone. Jasmine smirked, teasing, "Where do you disappear to so long?" Arthur shrugged, blaming slow service, but the faint blood smudges on his mask told a deeper story. Later that evening, bathed in the soft flicker of candlelight, Arthur poured his thoughts into a letter home. He spoke of his upcoming dungeon expedition, apologized for the sparse visits over the past 2 years, and shared his hopes for Lilia's growth under Vincent's mentorship before she enrolled at the academy. The thought of her becoming his senior felt surreal, a reminder that time marched on even when he felt suspended. He fondly recalled smaller victories, the pride of out-wrestling his father, moments less about raw strength and more about connection and respect. Most recently, he'd broken through the light orange mana stage, a milestone glimmering with promise, like leveling up in an epic RPG. Jasmine had become an invaluable partner in Arthur's journey, her mastery of wind magic complementing his growing prowess. Their training sessions were less like teacher-student drills and more like 2 gamers trading strategies in a co-op campaign, each pushing the other's limits, swapping insights, and discovering new combos. Arthur often joked that this was the kind of synergy esports teams dream of. Their banter mixed with the rush of spells created a rhythm that felt almost musical. As promised, this was to be Arthur's final mission before embracing the structured chaos of school life. Sitting down to pen a letter home, he poured his heart onto the page, ending with a tender confession of love that was as genuine as any viral heartfelt tweet. Once finished, he smiled, satisfied, and told Jasmine he'd mail it soon. She nodded, relieved. Better a letter than a family anxiously pacing outside a dungeon's looming gates. "Will Sylvie be coming along today?" Jasmine asked, her voice curious but cautious. Arthur shook his head. Sylvie had evolved, communicating now almost entirely through telepathy, and had grown too smart to just leap into every fray. She wanted to build strength, he explained, waiting until she was truly ready to fight alongside him. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, sensing an unspoken challenge beneath his words. Sounds like she's gearing up to be the MVP, Jasmine teased. No pressure on us, then. They hurried onward, only to find themselves blocked by a noisy group, Lucas and his entourage. That bratty kid had already gotten under Arthur's skin once, and now his presence was like a bad ad you can't skip. Leading the pack was Reginald Bastion, an A-class warrior whose confidence was almost as loud as his meticulously groomed mustache. Bastion wasted no time introducing his crew. Creole, a water specialist augmenter whose defensive spells were said to be as unbreakable as Fort Knox. Elijah, an A-class warrior with a penchant for earth magic and a reputation for crushing foes like the latest trending meme. Oliver, an A-class conjurer whose healing magic was as sharp as his tongue, often leaving teammates feeling like they'd just lost a roast battle. Samantha Tempest, an A-class conjurer specializing in water, fresh from the rumor mill as the masked swordsman's hopeful protege. And finally, Landon, the dashing Prince Charming of the group, recently promoted to AA class and set to lead today's dungeon raid. Landon, the self-appointed cool kid of the party, invited Jasmine and Arthur to introduce themselves. Jasmine, ever composed, noted her status as a AA augmenter with a specialty in wind magic, making her one of the few who could keep pace with Arthur's fire affinity. Arthur quietly added his own rank, A-class fire specialist, catching Samantha's surprised gaze. He confessed to holding back his magic for personal reasons, which only made Landon more curious. Didn't they have dimensional rings to handle luggage? Both Arthur and Jasmine shook their heads in unison, and Landon turned to Lucas, who flatly refused to help. Oliver was maxed out carrying Samantha's gear, but Elijah, surprisingly, volunteered, effortlessly sucking their bags into his dimensional ring, a high-tech relic from the legendary mages who'd built the floating city of Xyrus. These rings were the Rolex watches of their world, rare, costly, and status symbols all at once. Arthur's thanks caused Elijah to flush like he'd just been called out on Twitch chat for a newbie mistake. With gear sorted, the group made their way to the dungeon entrance. Brow, the leader, reminded everyone to keep their heads cool. It was their first step into the unknown. Lucas scoffed at the silence, claiming a monster-free dungeon was a waste of mana and excitement. Then the quiet was shattered by the fluttering menace of bat runners descending from the cavern ceiling, creatures straight out of a horror game boss fight. Jasmine was quick to action, saving Oliver just in time as he was nearly overwhelmed, while the tank raised a magical shield that reminded Arthur of a glitch-proof firewall. The healer's chants patched wounds, and Elijah's earth spears hammered the bats with the precision of a pro gamer nailing headshots. Brow swiftly called a tight formation, channeling the chaos into coordinated defense. Lucas, true to form, unleashed a massive fire cyclone, incinerating the bats in a blaze worthy of a pyrotechnic finale. The leader grumbled, displeased with Lucas's mana-hogging showboating. Mana conservation was the key to surviving this dungeon's brutal depths. They pressed deeper, Arthur noting the dungeon's notorious reputation, endless waves of undead and immortal fiends, making mana recovery nearly impossible. The first explorers dubbed it the Dire Tombs for good reason. Ascending through the shadowy corridors, Brow pointed out handholds carved into the stone, a lifeline from his previous forays. The team climbed, each step echoing like the tension before a championship match. Brow confided this was uncharted territory for them all, though he hoped to uncover the artifact fueling the dungeon's undead curse. The tank pledged to go all in for his share of the loot, a promise Brow eagerly supported. Suddenly, Arthur darted forward, narrowly saving Samantha from a cleverly concealed mana-triggered projectile. The group's frustration at Brow's earlier omission of traps was palpable. No one expected such cunning in this place. The healer checked Samantha's condition. She shrugged off the attack, but the masked swordsman's sharp eyes caught a sinister trace. The trap was crafted by a mana beast, not a mindless hazard. Alarm bells rang. Brow ordered everyone to sharpen their focus. Their exploration led them to a cavern suffused with red, smoky mists. Arthur's senses screamed, a powerful mana pressure unlike mere heat. They stepped into a chamber peppered with steaming geysers, but before they could react, the floor beneath them gave way. Chaos erupted as they plummeted into the dungeon's darker depths. the adventure escalating far beyond any training ground. The ground beneath their feet trembled ominously, a subtle vibration that grew steadily into a deafening roar. Even Brow, the seasoned leader who had faced countless battles, was perplexed by the sudden quake. His brow furrowed as he tried to pinpoint the cause, but before any words could be spoken, the answer revealed itself in the most terrifying fashion. A monstrous sandworm erupted from the earth with a thunderous explosion, as if it had crawled straight out of a sci-fi epic like Dune. The sheer scale of the creature was breathtaking, a living nightmare writ large, its segmented body writhing and burrowing as it unleashed primal fury. The healer was the first to visibly recoil, his wide eyes betraying the rare moment of panic. Yet, without missing a beat, he summoned his mana to conjure a towering sphere of water that cascaded like a protective dome, shielding the group from the initial onslaught. The brief reprieve was enough for Brow to rally his comrades, ordering a swift counterattack. Yet, despite their efforts, the sandworm seemed almost impervious. It slithered beneath the ground, eluding their strikes, its intentions unclear. "Never seen a mana beast this massive before," Brow muttered, tinged with apprehension. Creole was equally baffled. How had such a creature suddenly appeared in these dungeons, unrecorded in any bestiary or scroll? Their conversation was abruptly cut short by the worm's next move. In an astonishing display, it did not attack directly, but continued its silent passage underground, as though studying them or biding its time. The eerie calm unsettled the group. Ignoring warnings, Creole, brimming with overconfidence, advanced toward the rumored artifact. His reckless disregard for Brow's commands sparked frustration among his teammates. Samantha, sensing impending doom, muttered under her breath that his bravery was bordering on foolishness. Despite the concerns, Creole's determination was unwavering, his heavy footsteps echoing through the cavern as he pressed onward alone. Arthur's senses tingled with an almost preternatural awareness. The faintest shift underground hinted at danger, sending a cold wave of dread through him. He alerted Lucas to conjure an immediate heat wave barrier. The air shimmered with tension as Lucas snapped into action, erecting a protective wall near Oliver, who was blissfully unaware of the looming threat. Suddenly, a violent explosion erupted, scorching the area where Oliver stood moments before. The blast's heat was suffocating. The group could barely believe what they had witnessed. Oliver was engulfed in flames, his body charred beyond recognition, flesh melting like wax beneath a searing sun. Samantha's anguished scream cut through the chaos as she rushed to his side, but the damage was irreversible. Their healer was gone, a tragic casualty of their hubris. Arthur, despite the carnage, maintained his composure. He quickly retrieved the mana crystal from Oliver's remains, the life force embedded within pulsating faintly. Tossing it to Samantha, he instructed her to replace the crystal in her wand, a small but vital act to preserve their magical defenses. The urgency in his voice brooked no argument. The time to escape was now. Their retreat was a desperate sprint against time. Yet as they neared the exit, the dreaded sandworm re-emerged, blocking their path like an immovable colossus. Brow's command was immediate. Creole must raise a water barrier once more. But this time, the beast was different, more aggressive, clearly angered by their resistance. Elijah and Samantha combined their might, casting powerful stun spells to slow the creature. Earth spears erupted from the ground, snaring its massive form, yet the worm's resilience was unnerving. Brow and Jasmine coordinated their attacks, wind slicing and fire blazing in a deadly dance. Reginald, wielding relentless hammer strikes, targeted the creature's head, a decisive blow meant to turn the tide. Amidst the chaos, Lucas stood frozen, his earlier bravado shattered. Fire spells that once seemed his signature were now futile, the worm's skin impenetrable to his flames. Arthur's mind raced. If conventional magic failed, he'd have to escalate, channel his power to its absolute limit. His sword ignited with a blazing orange aura as he launched himself forward, cutting through the creature's defenses with precision born of desperation. The sandworm howled, blood seeping from newly fractured jaws. Jasmine followed up, her wind slicing a vicious arc, ripping through the monster's flesh. The worm recoiled, retreating into the depths. Their leader's voice echoed, urging haste, but Lucas, still bruised in pride, insisted the worm was scared off easily, a boast quickly silenced by the ground's renewed trembling. This time, the Earth's tremors were far more violent. Arthur realized with chilling clarity, the worm's true strategy was not direct attack, but to trigger a catastrophic eruption that would wipe them all out in one fell swoop. The team braced, hastily erecting barriers of flame and water to withstand the impending disaster. Arthur's flames roared to life, forming a blazing shield that saved Lucas from being incinerated, a reluctant salvation that only added fuel to Lucas's simmering rage. In the aftermath, the toll was grim. Brow screamed in agony, clutching his shattered limb, his pain raw and unrelenting. Samantha averted her gaze, tears streaming as she helped staunch the bleeding. Arthur's sword flashed in the dim light, a symbol of both hope and harsh reality. Amid the sorrow, Creole, ever the hearty soul, offered Arthur a sandwich, an emergency ration meant to soothe more than just hunger. They shared a rare moment of calm, the aroma of toasted bread and melted cheese a small comfort in the abyss. The group's fragile unity was shattered by Lucas's blame, his frustration spilling over into venomous accusations against Brow's leadership. The masked swordsman silenced the squabble with quiet authority, dismissing Lucas as a liability, spoiled child clinging to ego rather than teamwork. With Lucas's departure, the path forward became clear. Arthur urged Brow to make decisive choices. The dungeon awaited, and hesitation could mean death. Despite the wounds and losses, a fierce determination burned within them all. The dungeon's dark depths held more trials, but together, or at least with Arthur leading the charge, they would face whatever horrors lurked beyond. Arthur gritted his teeth, the tension thick in the damp dungeon air. Brow's eyes flickered with fierce determination as he responded without hesitation. "I'm ready to face this final raid of my life." The words, heavy with meaning, seemed to echo off the cavern walls, marking a pivotal moment. Samantha, standing close by, furrowed her brow in concern. "One arm won't make it easy," she cautioned gently, her voice carrying the weight of hard experience. Brow acknowledged her worries but remained resolute. "I won't be a liability," he vowed. Then, with a sharp glance toward Arthur, he laid down a condition that sent ripples through the group. "But if I'm to continue, leadership needs to shift a note here. He's the most pragmatic among us." The rest of the team exchanged looks. Silent consensus passed like a relay baton. They trusted Arthur, the masked swordsman whose skills had earned respect beyond his years. Even in this crucible of uncertainty, unity prevailed. Arthur accepted the responsibility without hesitation. His first decree was simple yet wise: 1 hour of rest before pushing forward. The team settled into brief respite, muscles relaxing, minds alert. But as they prepared to move on, Brow's brow furrowed anew. "This tunnel wasn't blocked before," he muttered, the creeping unease evident. Reginald stepped forward, hefting his weapon with practiced ease, swinging it against the obstruction, only to leave a faint dent. Not enough. With a sigh, Reginald infused his weapon with rocky energy, casting a barrage of stones, followed by a thunderous impact blast. The tunnel's shield spiraled but held firm, mocking their efforts. Jasmine caught his shoulder gently. "Try again, but with wind cutters," she advised. Their combined assault, earth and wind in deadly harmony, shattered the barrier, allowing light to pour through the newly formed opening. Blinded momentarily by the sudden brilliance, the group stepped cautiously into the unexpected. A sprawling forest had blossomed within the dungeon's depths. Arthur's eyes scanned the area, noting the absence of natural pillars. How hasn't this place collapsed? He wondered aloud. Around them, vibrant flowers bloomed defiantly, offering a deceptive haven. Creole, already rubbing his eyes, sighed sleepily. "Feels like nap time," he joked, a surprising sentiment given their recent rest. Arthur shook his head, impatience bubbling. "We keep moving." "Something's off." Creole nodded uncertainly. Meanwhile, Arthur's senses, honed by countless battles and heightened awareness, screamed warnings. The eerie stillness gnawed at him. Something hidden lurked beneath the surface. Ahead, Jasmine's sharp gaze caught movement, a shrouded figure, briefly hypnotic, before a thunderous thud shattered the illusion. Creole's face went pale as he dropped his weapon, eyes widening in shock. There, barely discernible, was Clara, his late wife, or rather, an illusion of her. His heart shattered anew, and without thought, he charged forward, desperate to reach her. The group's protests fell on deaf ears. Arthur's hand shot out, attempting to restrain the grieving man, but Jasmine grasped him firmly. "It's the mist," she explained, voice urgent yet steady. "It's messing with our minds, weaving illusions. That's why your senses were on edge." Arthur took command, rallying the group. "Stay close. Samantha, water barrier now." The shimmering wall rose, a shield against the creeping deception. Samantha nodded, casting her magic with precision. Curious, she whispered, "Who's Clara?" Reginald's somber tone cut through. "She's gone. Killed in a dungeon raid." He recounted the harrowing scene, his voice heavy with grief. "We buried her ashes ourselves. This is no ghost." Despite the sorrow, Reginald suggested searching for their missing teammate, hoping against hope. Lucas, growing restless and impatient, scoffed at their hesitation. "Why keep ignoring the plan to stick together? We're supposed to be pros here," he snapped, frustration dripping from every word. Arthur's focus remained fixed on Jasmine, who appeared shaken, distant. He gently asked, "Did you see something too?" She nodded, revealing the haunting vision of her own father, a call to surrender to darker paths, stirring old wounds. Arthur's anger flared, tempered by compassion as he reassured her. "You'll be okay." A fragile smile broke through her mask, a moment of warmth amid the darkness. Determined, Arthur urged Jasmine to wield her wind magic to clear the mist. Though her spells couldn't eradicate the fog completely, she carved a narrow path, allowing the team to advance. "Banshee howl," she announced, unleashing a concentrated gust that swept aside the illusions. What lay beyond stole their breath. Colossal vines, twisting and writhing where moments ago there was nothing. The sheer size defied logic, and worst of all, they were immune to Jasmine's wind attacks. Their leader, Brow, signaled caution as the monstrous flora loomed like a living fortress. Lucas, ever brash, summoned his crescent ember flames, aiming to incinerate the thick vines. Flames licked the surface, but the plant matter refused to burn. Lucas's surprise mirrored the group's growing unease. Arthur's mind raced. Moisture's keeping them alive, he deduced, watching as the vines resisted fire's assault. He instructed Brow to ignite his weapon with searing heat, but what happened next was unexpected. Brow, consumed by fury and desperation, attacked with reckless abandon. His swings wild, devoid of strategy, as if fighting madness itself. Jasmine fared better, deftly dodging and parrying with her twin blades. Arthur, unwilling to abandon caution, darted to Brow's side only to find him ensnared, vines coiling like serpents around his limbs. Without hesitation, Arthur's blade flashed, severing the constricting tendrils and freeing their embattled leader. "You're not dying here, not on my watch," Arthur said firmly, eyes blazing. Brow's wildness was dangerous. The boy urged him to fight smarter, with his mind, not just raw power. They still needed every capable hand. Lucas, frustrated but undeterred, downed a mana potion and let loose a sweeping flame attack with greater range. Arthur couldn't help but be impressed by the boy's determination despite his flaws. Reginald warned Elijah as a vine lunged toward him. Brow, recovering his wits, shielded the Earth Mage just in time. Elijah responded with an earth-shattering spell, breaking the ground beneath the vines and causing them to retreat. With their spells synchronizing, the team managed to hold the creeping threat at bay. Samantha contributed with a new skill, Aqua Siphon, drawing moisture from the vines to wither and weaken them. The spell drained her strength, and Arthur caught her before she could collapse, pride shining in his eyes for her cleverness. But their relief was short-lived. The mist rolled back in, rejuvenating the vines like a sinister tide. Even Lucas's confidence faltered, watching the greenery revive. Arthur realized the vines absorbed the mist's energy, feeding on it like fuel. Before he could rally his friends to counter, the plant monster seized control, paralyzing the team with an unholy grip, a cruel reminder that in this dungeon, every breath was a battle. Arthur spun on his heel, a chill crawling down his spine like the sudden realization you get when your phone battery hits 1% and you forgot your charger at home. The vines, once innocuous and twisted, had erupted into a towering eldritch nightmare, a grotesque behemoth straight out of a fever dream. It wasn't just some dungeon hazard. It was a colossus of nightmare proportions, like if a sleep paralysis demon had been bulked up on steroids and then unleashed on the world. The weight of dread knocked Arthur's sword from his grasp, the metallic clang echoing like a dropped mic in a silent room. His breath caught as he stared up at the monstrous form looming over them, its eyes like voids swallowing all hope. This wasn't a boss fight you could run from. It was a reckoning. Samantha, usually cool-headed and sharp as a sniper, froze in place, wide-eyed with pure terror. The legend of the Elderwood Guardian was no myth. It was a horrifying reality, one that swallowed hope whole. Brow, their battle-hardened augmenter and supposed rock of the squad, staggered, his face a grim mask of acceptance. No amount of guts or grit could turn the tide here. Survival was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand in a broken hourglass. Arthur's gaze flicked to Brow, whose blonde hair was now wild, eyes bloodshot and madness creeping in. The man had cracked under pressure again, throwing caution and perhaps sanity to the wind. Reginald's eyes bulged, his jaw slack, the horror palpable as he faced an S-class mana beast in a dungeon clearly not built for monsters of this scale. This was the kind of thing you hear about in whispered legends or see in hyper-realistic game trailers, but never expect to face yourself. Their breath caught as they saw Creole, their tank, reduced to a hollow vessel, his life being leached dry by the monstrous entity. Yet even as his strength drained, Creole whimpered pitifully, begging for his wife's return, a haunting echo of a broken man drowning in despair. The team stood frozen, paralyzed by the sheer hopelessness of the scene. Then, with a sickening crunch that made everyone wince, the Elderwood Guardian lifted its massive foot and crushed Creole beneath its grotesque weight. Reginald's anguished scream tore through the air like a battle anthem, raw and heart-wrenching. The monster's roar followed, a layered cacophony of jaws and teeth that could unsettle even the bravest souls. Reginald, now resembling a berserk anime hero who just lost his last friend, let loose a roar that shook the cavern walls. Arthur knew the fight was beyond anything Reginald could handle. If he challenged that beast now, it would be the last thing he ever did. "Stop!" Arthur shouted, voice cutting through the chaos like a hot knife through butter. "We can't win this fight. Fall back." But Reginald, consumed by fury and loss, swung his massive hammer and sent Arthur crashing through the air. The man's mind was lost to madness, his body armored in jagged rocks, ready to tear the creature apart or die trying. The battle resumed with brutal intensity. The Elderwood Guardian unleashed a hurricane of living vines that slammed toward the team like a swarm of angry protesters blocking a city street, relentless and overwhelming. Arthur screamed for Elijah to cast an emergency shield to protect Reginald, but the barrier shattered like glass under a hammer. Jasmine, sensing the tide turning, grabbed Arthur's arm fiercely. "We're done here. Get out. Now." Arthur's heart twisted. He glanced back at his friends, battered and bleeding, Elijah's barrier flickering as he sacrificed his life force to maintain it. But Arthur's promise to his team anchored him firmly in place. "I told them we'd come back alive." Tears glimmered in Jasmine's eyes as she reminded him, "I promised your family I'd protect you. That means surviving this." The Elderwood Guardian's next strike obliterated Elijah's barrier, leaving a shockwave that rocked the cavern floor. Reginald, fiery and unhinged, emerged from the chaos, cursing and vowing revenge on the beast. This wasn't just a battle, it was war for their very lives. Arthur knew they should retreat. But his loyalty refused to let him abandon his team, not when they needed him most. Jasmine, battling her own fears, gave a reluctant nod. The battle raged on. Reginald, clad in golem-like armor, swung his flaming blade in furious arcs, slicing through the monster's thorny vines. The beast howled in pain but lashed out with renewed fury, targeting the others with savage strikes. Reginald's attention snapped to vines creeping from behind. With a fierce swipe, he cleared them away, only to be ensnared again moments later. Arthur barked orders. Elijah covered Jasmine. Brow, get out of there. Their priority shifted from fighting to surviving. Suddenly, Arthur's eyes caught the massive roar of the Elderwood Guardian, dominating the battlefield. Their breaths hitched as they realized Reginald was fully trapped. Arthur turned to Lucas. "Burn the vines. Now." But Lucas, pride swallowing reason like a toxic meme gone viral, ignored the call. Instead, he aimed his staff at a cruel feint that sent Arthur flying as his body was pierced by a blazing beam. Pain exploded through Arthur's abdomen, and the world tilted dangerously. Jasmine's scream cut through the chaos as she lunged to shield him, but Lucas growled, warning her off before unleashing another searing blast. As the fiery blast struck her, she staggered, her body collapsing to the ground with a heavy thud, mirroring Arthur's own injuries. The air was thick with panic. Brow was now in a critical pinch. At that moment, Lucas, the half-elf whose pride often overshadowed reason, leveled his staff toward Elijah. His cold eyes promised a ruthless end should Elijah make even the slightest move. "Move, and you're dead," Lucas hissed, as if playing the role of a jealous game boss guarding the final treasure. Elijah's voice was filled with disbelief. "What's gotten into you?" But pride had its claws deep in Lucas, blinding him from the bigger picture. He wasn't ready to sacrifice himself for the team's escape. In his twisted mindset, dying heroically was the ultimate honor. With reckless abandon, Lucas blasted the mana crystal nearby, a desperate move to signal their heroic sacrifice to the outside world. Elijah clenched his fists, ready to launch at Lucas, but fate dealt a cruel hand. The Elderwood Guardian's vines, relentless and merciless, slammed him to the ground. The group's hope dwindled as the monstrous plant tore into them, its razor-sharp tendrils gnawing like some grotesque carnivorous beast in a horror film. It was an epic scene straight out of a high-budget fantasy game boss battle, intense, brutal, and unforgiving. But just as the darkness threatened to swallow them whole, a sudden blaze lit up the battlefield. The double A-class hero and former team leader emerged like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Flames wrapped around his arms like burning chains, illuminating the cavern's shadows. His presence was a beacon of hope, a throwback to classic superhero moments where the reluctant savior finally takes center stage. He marched forward, his flaming sword slashing down with righteous fury. The monstrous Elderwood Guardian let out a bone-chilling roar, its many-layered mouths opening wide as if to devour the very soul of the hero. His fiery assault painting the dungeon walls in an inferno of defiance. The sheer cinematic flair of his blaze-filled charge was the kind of moment gamers crave, the underdog turning tide with nothing but sheer will and a flaming sword, reminiscent of legendary anime heroes. Meanwhile, Elijah's gaze fell on Arthur and Jasmine, both battered, their strength waning fast. His final stand severed the Elderwood Guardian in two, but nature's cruel resilience showed as the vines began to regenerate, creeping like dark shadows rising again from a horror sequel nobody asked for. The hope that surged in his eyes turned to despair, and even Brow, the seasoned warrior, was frozen in terror. His usual bravado drained, he accepted the grim reality. This was no ordinary dungeon boss. This was a nightmare with roots and thorns. Arthur lay broken, coughing up blood, his mask slipping off to reveal the pale determination in his fading eyes. Consciousness wavered like a flickering streetlight in a storm. He glanced weakly toward Jasmine, who was barely hanging on. Amid the chaos, his eyes locked onto the glowing mana crystals, tiny sources of light in a dark world. With a heavy heart, he realized there was no conventional escape left. His hand trembled as he tapped into a hidden reserve of power, the second phase of the dragon's awakening. His memories drifted back to his elven training, the long nights mastering ancient arts. The first breakthrough, acquire, allowed him to momentarily disconnect from the flow of time and space itself, but at a steep cost. It drained his mana core, leaving him weak and vulnerable. Now the second phase, integration, was something even Vian, the elven sage, had taken decades to achieve. Arthur had unlocked it in just 3 years. His body began to change. His hair shimmered and shifted color, crackling softly with latent energy. This was no longer just a boy. This was a force awakening. Then, breaking through the chaos, the silhouette of Sylvie appeared, the missing piece of his strength. She was no longer the tiny dragon he once knew, but a majestic, mature winged beast, radiating power and wisdom. Her eyes locked with his, filled with fierce concern. Through their deep bond, Arthur sent a silent message: stay back, stay safe. If anything happens to him, she was to return to Vincent's place, to protect what remained of his fragile world. Sylvie, ever the stubborn little firebrand, flat out refuses to heed Arthur's desperate pleas. Her fierce independence shone through, the way a toddler defiantly refuses broccoli, no matter how much you promise it's good for them. Arthur, barely able to stand, his body battered and bruised beyond measure, begged her once more, "Please, just stay out of this fight this time." For once, she relented, trusting the silent promise that he'd come back safely. The camera-like focus zooms in on Arthur's face, a storm of raw emotion scrambling his mind as he limps forward, determined and unyielding. He leaps onto a jagged rock, steadying himself, every breath a sharp reminder of his pain and resilience. Drawing a deep breath, Arthur channels every ounce of his willpower, weaving a precise spell with a laser-focused gaze fixed on the colossal eldritch beast, the kind of nightmare creature that would send shivers down even the toughest gamer's spine. His mind flashed back to Vian, the legendary warrior who insisted on knocking out enemies fast and hard, no time for mercy. Since entering the integration phase of his dragon's awakening, Arthur knew this would be his fastest strike yet, aiming to minimize the brutal backlash that followed every surge of his new power. The air around him turned frigid as his ice affinity kicked into overdrive, freezing the writhing vines in place. But ambient mana control still challenged him. Those cursed vines started twitching and writhing despite the freeze, breaking free like a poorly coded AI glitch in a game glitching out under heavy load. Arthur cursed under his breath, his concentration razor-sharp, as he froze them again, just in time to block their deadly approach. This was no ordinary frost spell. He just unleashed Absolute Zero, a move designed to stop the monster cold, literally, and neutralize its threat. Taking advantage of the monster's frozen moment, Arthur summoned an unprecedented combination of 3 elemental affinities into the palm of his hand, his body crackling with electric purple lightning like a scene ripped straight from a cyberpunk showdown. The attack obliterated the creature's grotesque face and shattered what remained of its once vibrant vines. The monstrous boss toppled, defeated, but victory came at a devastating cost. Blood seeped from every orifice on Arthur's body, his strength drained to nothing. The hero collapsed to the cold ground, utterly spent, his body unable to give anything more. Cut to the city of Xyrus, Arthur's family shared a quiet moment in their home. Ellie, utterly exhausted from her own grueling training, was tucked into bed with Reynolds standing watchful by her side. Suddenly, an unsettling noise rang out, followed by the eerie glow of the mana crystal on her ring. Both parents stiffened, the kind of moment you'd recognize from a horror flick where the phone rings and no one's supposed to pick it up. Arthur's mother clutched the ring, hoping desperately it was a malfunction and not the dreaded signal she feared. Back in the dungeon, Arthur's consciousness fluttered weakly beneath the crushing weight of pain. Blood trickled from his lips as Elijah, ever the steadfast ally, noticed his awakening. With urgency, Arthur begged him to shatter the healing crystal embedded in his glove. Elijah didn't hesitate, breaking the gem with a decisive strike that released a pool of healing magic, unshackling Arthur's frozen fingers from the unforgiving ice magic's grip. A wave of relief washed over the boy, though his mind fixated for a brief moment on the betrayal, the bastard who had abandoned them. The thirst for revenge flared, but he pushed it down, redirecting his concern toward Jasmine's condition. Elijah gestured to his side, where Jasmine lay unconscious, having endured a harsher attack. Unlike Arthur, her body hadn't been enhanced with mana, and though Elijah managed to treat her burns, internal injuries were still suspected. Sensing the urgency, Arthur instructed him to use the second healing gem on her. Elijah complied, pouring healing energy into Jasmine's battered form, confident she would recover fully within hours. Arthur reflected gratefully on the birthday gift, the precious gems crafted by Mother, realizing how instrumental they were in saving lives here. The pain was reminiscent of his own struggles at age 4, a reminder that growth often came hand in hand with suffering. Meanwhile, Sylvie, sensing her father's return to consciousness, surged toward the dungeon entrance with the urgency of a mother bear protecting her cub. But Arthur, despite his weakness, urged her to focus on training and hold back for now, assuring her that danger had passed and there was nothing for her to worry about yet. Their conversation was interrupted as Elijah checked on Arthur's vitals. Despite his condition, Arthur joked about being in tip-top shape to run a marathon, drawing an amused smirk from Elijah, who compared him to David Goggins, the legendary ultra-endurance athlete known for pushing human limits. Elijah, always the observer, noted with surprise how young the masked swordsman really was, almost a peer in age. The realization brought a pang of nostalgia as Arthur recalled losing his iconic mask during the battle, a symbol even Elijah hadn't managed to recover from the ruins. More pressing for Arthur was his sword, or rather the absence of it. Gratefully, Elijah revealed he had recovered the stick by sheer chance, easing Arthur's worries. Exhausted, Arthur fell back, silently acknowledging the debt he owed Elijah, not only for saving their lives but for safeguarding his weapon. A truly noble act in a world where survival often meant selfishness. Elijah argued that abandoning others to save oneself was no better than Lucas's betrayal, drawing a sharp laugh from Arthur, who declared that spoiled brat even worse. The conversation turned serious as Elijah probed Arthur on why he'd risked so much for others. Arthur's answer was simple yet profound, a promise to someone dear to become a person who could truly cherish those around him. This heartfelt confession cracked the stoic veneer Elijah wore, eliciting a rare laugh. He mused on the depth of life experience required to hold such beliefs at such a young age. Changing the subject with a more practical tone, Arthur asked how long he'd been unconscious. Elijah, uncertain but guessing it was more than a full day, noted that they'd likely be stuck until Jasmine recovered. Arthur saw opportunity in their forced downtime. Extending his hand in friendship, he introduced himself by his real name and his chosen moniker, Art, a small smile breaking through his fatigue. Thus began a genuine bond, with Elijah revealing his roots in the Dwarven Kingdom, tapping a metal ring on his finger as he shared stories. Arthur, ever curious, inquired if Elijah was the craftsman behind the metal shelter that had kept the cavern from collapsing, a feat only a dwarf could pull off. Elijah chuckled, confirming his handiwork. The revelation about the metal shelter gave Arthur new perspective on the Elderwood Guardian's body. It had stabilized the dungeon, preventing collapse for a significant time. Arthur, in turn, shared his own tale, and Elijah, intrigued, requested an explanation for the boy's sudden transformation. The white hair, the aura of a living god. Memories flickered for both. Elijah recalled Arthur's eyes glowing purple during a crucial moment, a testament to the power now coursing within him. Their exchange was honest and open, both young warriors trading truths as equals. As Arthur was about to explain further, Jasmine's loud snore interrupted, the tension broken as she dreamily mumbled to Arthur in her sleep. The moment lightened with shared laughter, a brief respite from the dangers they'd faced. Elijah, cheeks flushed with emotion, apologizes for unloading such a heavy story. But Arthur waves it off, his curiosity shifting gears. Now it's time to hear about the masked swordsman's true origins. Without hesitation, Arthur lays it all out. He's a quadri-elemental caster, an augmenter wielding the deviant powers of ice and lightning. It's a lot to take in all at once. Elijah, in his surprise, literally bumps his head, as if knocked out by the revelation. He had always thought he was the top-tier weirdo in their circle, only to be blindsided by Arthur's unique mix of talents. Arthur then explains the markings on his body, a signature of his beast-taming skills. I released my beast back there, he adds casually, but Elijah's jaw practically drops. Then comes the kicker. Arthur's only 11 years old. Elijah, a year older, thinks it's a bit humbling to be outpaced by someone younger, but the two share a laugh over the absurdity. Two misfits bonding over the chaos of their lives. Despite the relief, Arthur's body still aches. He reaches for the last healing gem, pressing it to his wounds. Just then, Jasmine stirs awake, her eyes snapping open as she takes in Arthur's battered state. Panic floods her as she clutches him, apologizing tearfully for failing to protect him. The weight of guilt is real, heavy enough to break a steel heart. Arthur softens instantly, wrapping her in a quiet, steady embrace. It's okay, he murmurs, his voice a bomb. I chose to stay and fight. You got hurt because of me. For a brief moment, he notices how small she looks next to him, something new in their dynamic, and an ache tugs at his side, causing her concern. She quickly summons Elijah to open their storage ring, revealing a well-packed emergency kit. Slowly, she tends to him, wrapping him up like a mummy. Bandages crisscross his arms and legs, but despite the wounds, Arthur stands tall, supported by his loyal friends. It's time to go home. The trio makes their way out, Elijah conjuring a metal barrier to shield them. Outside, the world is eerily silent, everything coated in a frosty glaze. Arthur's voice breaks the quiet. Did anyone else make it out? The answer stings. Both Brow and Reginald didn't survive. Most likely, no one else did either. Guilt crashes down on Arthur like a freight train. Jasmine, ever the pragmatist, wonders aloud about Samantha's fate. Elijah explains how he encased her in a protective metal shell before they parted ways, but admits uncertainty about her survival. Arthur shares the same worry, knowing their cage-like prison offers little hope for easy escape. Determined, Arthur scans the area for the monster's elusive beast core, a priceless artifact lost in the icy chaos. Elijah, unable to locate it before, now summons his earth magic. Calling forth a spell known as Earth's Pulse, he sends a rippling signal through the ground, searching for any sign of life. The tension breaks when Elijah detects Samantha, alive, though battered. Following his lead, Arthur and Elijah press onward. They find the metal cocoon Elijah forged around Samantha, and with careful precision carve it open. Samantha lies inside, severely burned and bruised. Arthur advises caution. The vines nearby are responsible for worsening her injuries. Her breathing is steady, but the fever burning within her is deeply concerning. Still, Arthur finds a small comfort. She's unconscious, shielded from the agony of awareness. Elijah, a pragmatist even in crisis, wonders aloud if being unconscious is truly a blessing. The weight of responsibility presses on them all. Jasmine, carrying Samantha's frail body, suggests retreat. Arthur scans the surroundings anxiously. The loss of the S-Class Mana Beast core will be catastrophic. Suddenly, the dungeon trembles beneath their feet. Elijah readies a spell, but Arthur halts him. He knows what's coming. With a deafening crack, the dungeon ceiling shatters, and before them stands a sight both terrifying and awe-inspiring. A fully matured Sylvie, now a majestic and powerful dragon. The little wyvern from years past is transformed into a colossal beast, her scales shimmering with the weight of her growth. Arthur's shock is palpable. She was tiny, a mere lizard-sized companion, and now this awe-inspiring creature towers over them. Sylvie greets her master with a playful lick, ruining his carefully tousled hair in the process. Elijah reels, struggling to grasp how a wyvern could evolve into a four-limbed, majestic dragon, a real dragon, not just a myth. Arthur confirms it with a wry smile and affectionately introduces Sylvie to Elijah. Elijah's mind races, trying to reconcile the existence of dragons, creatures thought extinct for centuries. Arthur warns him their secret must be kept at all costs. Jasmine already knows, and Sylvie's affection doesn't discriminate, giving her the same hair-ruffling welcome. The trio decides to use Sylvie as their escape lift. Arthur instructs Elijah to climb aboard. With a rush of wind and fiery scales glinting under the dungeon's eerie light, they soar out of the hellish depths. Landing outside the boss's lair, they continue on foot, facing down waves of bat runners, creatures who scatter like frightened school kids at the sight of a real dragon. Elijah can't help but joke, why didn't they bring Toothless along for this raid? Meanwhile, Samantha stirs, slowly regaining consciousness. They gently lay her down for rest. When her eyes flutter open, she sees Arthur, maskless and real, a sight that somehow makes her smile despite her pain. Arthur urges her to conserve strength. She clutches something precious, both a beast core and Arthur's shattered mask. Arthur's heart swells with gratitude and pride. You save these, he murmurs, praising her quiet bravery. Plans form in his mind. They'll split the profits from selling the core. Jasmine refuses, insisting Arthur deserves it most. Elijah echoes her sentiment, wanting nothing to do with the monster's remains. Arthur, ever the realist, reminds them how valuable the mana core truly is. Samantha insists the core belongs to Arthur, crediting his final stand for her survival. The boy accepts, feeling the weight of their trust. He checks Samantha's pulse once more and tells Jasmine and Elijah to seek medical aid as soon as possible. They rise, determined. Before departing, Elijah leaves his emergency bag with Arthur, ensuring he's stocked for whatever lies ahead. That's when Arthur spots the mana scroll and feels the sudden urge to write his parents, to ease their fears, to promise his return. The message is sent, a thread of hope between worlds. Curious about Sylvie's dramatic growth, Arthur watches as she demonstrates her transformation, shrinking back to the familiar lizard they all love. The little dragon approaches, and Arthur pets her gently, though his own injuries scream for attention. Help is still hours away, but with a new beast core in hand, he steels himself. Taking a deep breath, Arthur's thoughts drift to Lucas, the infamous boy from a family with a notorious reputation. One man's reckless actions had cost them dearly, leading to Brow's death and leaving the rest gravely wounded. Arthur's mind hardens with resolve, fueled by the sting of vengeance yet tempered by the bonds forged in battle. Arthur's mind was a storm of careful calculation and fierce resolve. He knew this wasn't some quick brawl to be swept under the rug. This was personal, a reckoning with Lucas that would stretch however long it needed. The rescue team arrived eventually, cutting through the chaos like EMTs rushing into a disaster zone. Samantha was whisked away to the hospital, her condition severe but stable. Brow, their steadfast tank and rock, had given his all and met his tragic end in the depths of that cursed dungeon. Arthur himself was battered, yet somehow still breathing, standing on the edge of exhaustion but unbroken. Back in the guild hall, as his friends sat down to recount the traumatic events to Branchmaster Caspian, Arthur felt the weight of it all pressing in. The raw retelling was more than they bargained for. Each shared what they could, their voices heavy with memory and loss. Caspian, a seasoned leader who'd seen his share of war stories, finally waved them off to rest. They deserved it. But peace was fleeting. The heavy wooden doors swung open, and in strutted Lucas Weiss, flanked by a squad of guards that looked more like an entourage from a high-budget video game cutscene than actual protectors. Jasmine and Elijah moved in unison, hands ready on weapons, prepared to dismantle the threat in an instant. Yet Arthur, always the tactician even when bruised, held up a hand. Wait, let's not jump the gun. Lucas, the spoiled heir to a notorious family, played the victim like a pro actor in a Netflix drama, his voice dripping with fake innocence. He baited Caspian's patience, each word a thorn in the branchmaster's side. How did you escape my trap? Did you sacrifice someone to get away? His accusations were as predictable as a viral TikTok trend, but no less aggravating. Caspian's patience snapped, a roar cutting through the tension like a heavy metal riff. Yet Lucas didn't back down, throwing more shade and pointing fingers, this time claiming Samantha was the pawn they'd sacrificed. His last jab aimed at Brow, painting the fallen tank as expendable. But Arthur wasn't having it. With the cold precision of a samurai, he slashed his blade inches from Lucas's smug face, slicing his ear clean without even a flicker of hesitation. Lucas blinked, playing the wounded animal again, but Arthur's fury was no act. Rising, his presence shifted the air. The room grew heavy with an almost tangible pressure, like the moment before a legendary esports final match begins. Lucas's confidence crumbled visibly. He trembled under the intensity. The guards lunged, but Arthur moved like a shadow in slow motion, dodging every blow with effortless grace. It was like watching a highlight reel of the world's best ninja gamer. No kill necessary, just the art of making opponents look foolish. Caspian cautioned him quietly. One wrong move could spiral into disaster. But Arthur's first strike wasn't a blow. It was a reclaiming of his sword, and it sent Lucas into full panic mode, shaking like a kid who just realized their phone is missing before a big exam. Turning sharply, Arthur commanded Caspian's aide to escort Lucas to the medical ward. Then, with a slight nod, he dismissed his friends. He needed a private word with the branchmaster, a conversation without distractions. Caspian urged restraint, warning against falling for provocations. But Arthur was a force now, marching with unyielding resolve. Behind his mask, the fire of vengeance burned hotter than ever. He wasn't just a swordsman. He was a storm with a purpose. His voice dropped to a bone-chilling calm. Are you truly able to protect Lucas from what's coming? The branch master met his gaze, unwavering, and said quietly that he wasn't threatening, only advising. Taking down Lucas might solve one problem, but the W family's retaliation will be swift and brutal. They'd come after Jasmine first, then spread through Arthur's entire circle. The connections the W's had were like a well-oiled political machine. Caspian counseled patience, urging Arthur to build strength before provoking a family with roots that could choke entire kingdoms. Even his power might not be enough against Lucas's half-brother. This was a revelation Arthur hadn't considered, and he silently thanked Caspian for the wisdom. Then he settled into the chair with the weight of command, laying out his demands clearly and confidently. Caspian, sensing a new era dawning, pledged his support without hesitation. Outside the door, his friends awaited, anxiety written on their faces, expecting a storm. But Arthur just smiled wryly and changed the subject. Hunger trumped vengeance for now. He strode off, leaving a mix of relief and worry behind. The hearing was set, a courtroom drama worthy of a primetime streaming hit. Arthur and Lucas faced off, their fates tied to the judgment of the guild jury. After careful consideration, the verdict was decisive. Lucas was the rat who betrayed his comrades, stripped of rank and forever barred from adventuring. Arthur, hiding his satisfaction beneath his mask, found a punishment surprisingly lenient given Lucas's crimes. Then the focus shifted to him, the masked swordsman. The guild decided to exile Note from the city until Lucas completed his academy term. It was exactly the outcome Arthur had hoped for, though he feigned anxiety for show. The panel emphasized that Arthur's license would not be revoked outright. His acts were deemed just. He could continue his journey, as long as Lucas remained far away. Lucas's smug smile faded as he voiced concerns about Arthur's concealed identity, fearing Note might unmask and strike back under a new guise. The panel agreed to keep Arthur's identity confidential, with only a select few conjurers monitoring him. Lucas left, bitter and defeated, warning Arthur to keep his distance. Arthur, calm and unbothered, replied simply, "I'm nothing more than a pretty boy." Escorted away, Arthur was granted special protection. He and the panel had passed through a hidden passage, revealing that the entire trial had been a carefully orchestrated chess game. Arthur's relief was tempered by caution. The W family's shadow loomed large, and the truth could never be fully buried. He resolved to remain vigilant. The panel expressed hope that Arthur would remember this favor, one that might be called upon when the time came. The masked swordsman nodded silently, promising never to forget his allies. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The Elder's final verdict? Caspian was right. Arthur was truly a force to be feared. Arthur pushed open the door, greeted instantly by Sylvie's enthusiastic tackle. Elijah and Jasmine were there too, their weary faces hinting the nightmare was finally over. Together, they stepped into the daylight, home at last. As they walked, Elijah suggested visiting Samantha before parting ways. Arthur advised against it, but encouraged Jasmine to check on her. At the city gates, the reality of separation hit. Arthur reminded Elijah that he wasn't from the Sapien Kingdom and invited him to visit before school started. Elijah struggled to grasp the concept of school, his frustration relatable. No one's born knowing what an exam feels like after all. School was new terrain for him, a strange realm of ambition and opportunity. Arthur, ever practical, saw education as the key to climbing the ranks in a world governed by power and politics. Elijah, skeptical but intrigued, worried about the barriers, the qualifications, money, and connections required to step foot into the prestigious Magic Academy. Arthur tightened his grip around Elijah's shoulder, a silent promise in the gesture. "You've done enough," he said with quiet assurance. "Now, all you need to do is drag yourself to the academy. The rest will fall into place." The kind of support that only a battle-forged friendship can bring settled between them. Arthur then turned to Jasmine, his voice steady but tinged with fatigue. "Take him home. I've got other fires to put out." The looming problem was clear. Lucas was going to be at the academy too. That was one of the reasons Elijah made the decision to go, grateful to have earned a true ally in Arthur. As they slipped away, Elijah nodded toward Caspian, who emerged from the shadows like a strategist revealing his next move. Arthur felt a flicker of satisfaction. He maneuvered the judge exactly how he'd wanted. Lucas was blinded for now. The immediate crisis was resolved, but the wounds left behind ran deep. "This hole," Arthur reminded Caspian softly, "it still cost us heroes." Caspian's voice dropped to a low murmur, laced with regret but steely resolve. "I don't want to start another war today." "Here," he said, tossing Arthur a worn leather pouch, heavy with gold. "This should help with your next steps." Arthur glanced at the weight in his hand, enough to make even a few high-stakes RPG players jealous. Caspian's parting words lingered. "You'll only face trouble if you let it find you." The one worry tugging at Arthur's mind was whether Lucas had caught sight of Sylvie, his ever-changing dragon companion. A flicker of movement made him glance back. Sylvie shifted form effortlessly, her mini transformations a secret weapon. It was a side of dragons the old legends never told, but was one Arthur had come to rely on, like a favorite gaming skin with hidden buffs. Later, Arthur ran a hand through his hair, adjusting to a fresher style, and stepped into an inventory shop. The gleaming ring on display caught his eye, a dimension ring, expensive and rare, but essential. His cluelessness was met with a knowing smirk from the shopkeeper, as the price was casually tossed around like the latest smartphone release. Without hesitation, Arthur pulled out a hefty bag of gold, leaving the shopkeeper wide-eyed and speechless. He splurged on the ring, barely big enough to hold his sword and the precious beast core, but it was done. Fully prepped, he hailed a carriage bound for the Day Manor, thoughts swirling about the last 2 years since he'd adopted the identity of note. The view from the carriage window was a blur of golden fields and city spires, a reminder that life, like any open-world RPG, always had new quests ahead. What would school be like? Would he find worthy rivals, or was it just another tutorial level? Night had fallen when Arthur finally returned home. Ellie, his younger sister, glared at him with the fiery intensity of a little sibling who'd missed her hero. Before he could even catch his breath, she tackled him with a fierce hug, tears and laughter tangled in her voice. Arthur grinned, relieved to see her growing up strong, though a pang of brotherly dread hit him at the thought of her dating some clueless suitor one day. A classic sibling nightmare. His parents greeted him with open arms, warmth pouring in like a healing spell. Reynolds, ever the joker, mocked Arthur's unruly hair as the lone sign of growth on his otherwise lean frame. The family banter filled the room with the comforting chaos only home could bring. Arthur's mother held him close, her voice trembling with relief. "You came back to us," she whispered. "I did. And I'm sorry for the worry," Arthur promised, his voice soft but steady. Vincent and the others were there too, a familiar circle of friends and family sharing stories and smiles. As Arthur freshened up, he found a letter from Jasmine waiting, a succinct, no-nonsense note, her characteristic practicality shining through the scribbles where affection might have been. He wished he'd been there to see her off, but knowing her coordinates was a small consolation. Vincent's face lit up like a proud dad announcing a viral TikTok star. Lilia had been at Xyrus Academy for almost a year now. Arthur felt a swell of gratitude knowing that his family's lineage was in good hands, thanks in part to Vincent's unwavering support. Turning to Elijah, Arthur made a request, but first Reynolds couldn't contain his excitement about the dungeon dive. The tale started slow, like a long live stream that needed time to warm up, but when it hit the scary parts, even Vincent shuddered. The Elderwood Guardian had been a nightmare brought to life, yet Arthur's lone victory over it was a legend in the making. Curious about his father's progress, Arthur asked about Reynolds' mana level. Reynolds sighed. Despite relentless effort, he hadn't broken past the dark orange stage. Arthur tossed him a beast core, a precious gift that pulsed with latent power. Reynolds hesitated, understanding the sacrifice behind the gift. This wasn't just any treasure. It was an S-class beast core, the kind players farm for months in-game to upgrade gear or unlock special abilities. But Arthur's priorities were clear. His father had to catch up. Using the core, Reynolds felt a surge, a light burning brighter than before. For once, he admitted defeat. His son had surpassed him, reaching the elusive light orange stage. It was a challenge issued in the true spirit of family rivalry, one that promised many rematches to come. The next day, Elijah was relaxing in the bath when Arthur, ever the wild card, barged in with his pajamas, unbothered by the intrusion. He dropped them off quickly before retreating, leaving Elijah to slam the door in mock indignation. Arthur caught a glimpse of his mask, a symbol of battles fought and identities kept secret. 2 years had changed everything, including Sylvie, who now towered over him. Elijah emerged, curious about Arthur's long conversation with Vincent, a conversation that secured a sponsorship for the academy. The dwarven boy's excitement was palpable. Becoming a student of the academy wasn't just a step. It was a leap into a world where power and knowledge danced a delicate tango. Elijah wondered if the experience might be boring given their strengths, but Arthur promised it would be a new challenge. Elijah was ready to test his mettle, eager to awaken greater powers. Arthur, meanwhile, grappled with managing his dual deviants, the draining lightning and the unruly ice. The question of how to handle Lucas loomed. For now, Lucas remained unaware of Arthur's true identity, which gave them an edge. In a rare moment of levity, Arthur teased Elijah about his fortress of pillows, a playful shield from the world. Elijah countered with a question about love lives, sparking laughter as Arthur joked about nerd couples producing Jimmy Neutron babies, a playful jab at geek culture that lightened the mood. Elijah confidently predicted Arthur would be the Academy's Rouge Ninja, a nickname as mysterious as it was amusing, while Arthur assured him girls his age weren't really his type. As sleep claimed them, Arthur woke to find Vincent at the door, eager to share news of an inventor named Gideon, reputed as the best in his trade. Gideon's upcoming visit would open doors, offering a chance to detour from their plans and explore new opportunities. Before meeting up with the others in the city, Arthur felt surprisingly calm about the plan unfolding around him. He mulled over the idea of something big brewing downtown. Vincent, noticing the spark in Arthur's eyes, filled him in. The royal families of all three kingdoms are about to make a major announcement. It's going to be broadcast live from the central square. The city's buzzing already. Arthur couldn't help but smile. It was moments like this that made him grateful for Uncle Vincent, a steady hand and a well of insider knowledge in this ever-complicated world. Meanwhile, his mind wandered to the meeting ahead with Gideon, the eccentric inventor whose name carried legendary weight. Arthur was eager to put the sharp edges of his past life knowledge into practical use, a fusion of old-school ingenuity and new-age mana manipulation. Vincent, ever the pragmatic, looked a bit confused by Arthur's excitement, until Reynolds appeared, cutting through the crowd to remind Vincent about an urgent engagement. The auction house owner bolted off with all the urgency of a kid late for a concert, leaving the father and son to their own devices. Reynolds, now officially in the solid orange mana stage, a milestone many adventurers spent years chasing, quietly handed over a beast core that refused to shatter, even after all its mana had been drained. The core's persistence baffled them both. Reynolds entrusted the core to Arthur, a silent nod of respect passing between them before they parted ways. Later that day, Arthur sat cross-legged in meditation, the strange core glowing softly beside him. He struggled to grasp how this jewel could resist crumbling. Images of the towering Elderwood Guardian, the nightmare that had haunted his recent battles, flickered in his mind like a glitching hologram. Curious and cautious, Arthur delved deeper into the concept of beast wills, primal forces gifted by the mana beasts themselves, infusing their inheritors with devastating power. These wills were like the rawest, purest energy boosts imaginable, only passed down from the mightiest of creatures. His excitement grew as he imagined the possibility of merging two beast wills. What kind of power could that yield? Testing this theory, Arthur plunged back into meditation, calling upon the Elderwood Guardian's dark spirit. His body glowed a fierce purple, the will of his beast, Sylvia, manifesting with terrifying intensity. The giant was momentarily overwhelmed, quaking under the spectral pressure. Breaking free, Arthur realized a critical truth. The two beast wills were locked in conflict, clashing rather than harmonizing. Suddenly, it made sense why his father hadn't been able to absorb the entire crystal. The synergy simply wasn't there. Compatibility was everything. That revelation settled like a stone in Arthur's mind. Now he knew exactly who deserved the core. His thoughts flicked briefly to Tesha, wondering how she was faring in her own battles. The days that followed were almost peaceful, with training sessions and warm family moments grounding Arthur like any regular kid. Ellie, his fiery little sister, burst into his room one morning, intent on rousing him for breakfast, only to find him knocked out cold, mumbling nonsense in his sleep. Today was the big announcement, and their mother insisted they get ready. Ellie, exasperated but loving, smacked Arthur hard enough to wake the dead. "Come on, slowpoke." "Breakfast waits," she sang as she walked away, humming a pop tune that somehow felt out of place in their old-world village. Arthur just shook his head, grinning at the chaos his sister always brought with her. A little later, Arthur and Elijah decided to explore the bustling marketplace. Arthur, ever the penny pincher, clutched his savings tightly while Elijah confidently browsed the wares. Sending his bond to trail Elijah, Arthur made his way to the inventor's workshop. But as they approached, a pungent smell stopped Arthur dead in his tracks, a musty stench that seemed stuck in time. The butler greeting them looked like a zombie who'd skipped showers for centuries, complete with sunken eyes and a permanent scowl. At first, Arthur thought he might be hallucinating. The old man grumbled, but recognized Vincent and grudgingly let them in. Inside, Gideon, the inventor himself, was the very picture of eccentric genius, wild-haired, cantankerous, and clearly fed up with the constant royal entreaties demanding his skills for oceanic voyages. Arthur blinked in confusion when Gideon ranted about the absurdity of it all. 12 royal messengers, all trying to bully me into setting sail. What do they think this is? A cruise ship? The inventor's glare softened slightly when he caught sight of Arthur. Vincent introduced him formally, but Gideon was quick to remind them that he didn't usually take on apprentices, especially not ones who showed up unannounced. Arthur, however, had his own agenda. He politely but firmly presented an offer. He'd handle all logistics to ensure Gideon's safe passage. The inventor's interest peaked as Arthur unfurled a large, hand-drawn blueprint, a concept for a steam-powered engine fueled by external materials, something even Gideon hadn't conceived. At first, Gideon sneered, "Kid, this looks like doodles from a toddler's notebook." But as he examined the design, his expression darkened with astonishment. This was revolutionary, an idea far ahead of its time, one that could challenge the very foundations of their mana-dependent world. Arthur admitted he'd purposely left out key details, wanting to negotiate before revealing everything. Gideon's skepticism melted into cautious respect. Summoning his butler, Gideon led Arthur to a treasure chest containing a brilliant ironized diamond, a rare gem capable of storing vast amounts of mana. Arthur barely glanced at it, uninterested in mere glitter. Undeterred, Gideon brought out his big guns, a collection of priceless artifacts, including a mirror so rare he'd never revealed it before. Arthur rejected each item with icy calm, the mirror slipping from Gideon's grasp and only saved by the butler's quick reflexes. Vincent was baffled, watching the boy's relentless refusals as Gideon grew increasingly frustrated. Finally, the inventor presented 2 exquisitely crafted pendants, rumored to be the crown jewels of the royal family. Arthur examined one closely, forged from the elusive phoenix worm, an S-class mana beast as rare as dragons themselves. Known for their legendary ability to preserve existence, phoenix worms stored powerful defensive magic within their exoskeletons. The pendant's enchantment was genius, a protective shell that activated in the face of danger and upon shattering will consume stored mana to whisk the wearer away to the safest mental sanctuary. It was a perfect emergency escape. "How many times can this be used?" Arthur asked, voice calm but eyes sharp. Gideon shrugged. "I burned through 5 of those phoenix cores making these pendants. They should hold up for 2 uses max." Arthur's thoughts turned to his mother and sister, imagining how such protection could save them. He also remembered these gifts came from the royal family. Though Gideon cared little for politics, his focus was squarely on Arthur's ambitions. Feigning innocence, Arthur claimed he only wanted a birthday present for his sister. Gideon, ever perceptive, smirked knowingly and pressed him on his real intentions. Arthur laid down his final condition. No more secrets would be shared unless he was sure of the inventor's true motives. Gideon dismissed the fuss, insisting it was pointless since the upcoming announcement would reveal everything soon enough. Arthur, however, wasn't satisfied with the usual polished speeches meant to placate the crowd. He demanded the raw, unfiltered truth straight from the inventor's mouth. The inventor hesitated, wondering if spilling his ambitions would cost him the deal on the pendants. But Arthur was relentless, pressing harder in negotiations without any hint of backing down. Gideon, growing weary, found himself practically pleading for Arthur to accept just 1 pendant instead of 2. In response, Arthur's lips curled into a satisfied grin as he casually sparked a torch to life in his hand, threatening to reduce the blueprint he'd just drawn to ashes. That was the moment the inventor realized he was dealing with no ordinary brat. This boy was something else entirely. Vincent jumped in, firmly vouching for Arthur's promises, easing some of Gideon's tension. Finally, Gideon relented, entrusting the pendants to the boy's care. He reflected aloud on how, only a year ago, the idea of a second continent beyond Kathleen was borderline absurd, almost laughable. Arthur's eyes widened, stunned by the confirmation, while Vincent was equally shaken, recalling how a royal family employee had warned him never to share rumors like these. Gideon's recent admission added an undeniable layer of credibility. Lost in thought, Arthur demanded proof beyond just words. The inventor was almost insulted by the implication that they hadn't already gathered solid evidence. He settled into his chair and began a thorough explanation. Years ago, they had uncovered a unique artifact clinging to a mana beast, something utterly unlike anything previously found on their continent. This artifact had the extraordinary ability to camouflage itself flawlessly, blending seamlessly with its surroundings. Vincent's eyes widened as he asked how they managed to capture such a creature. Luck had favored them when an adventurer aiming for a squirrel instead accidentally struck a bird, revealing the artifact attached to it. The artifact's design was so complex that even the great inventor himself struggled to understand its inner workings. The artifact's true purpose remained a royal secret, withheld from all but the highest ranks. Arthur's patience snapped as he once again threatened to burn the blueprint, provoking Gideon's ire. With a dark edge in his voice, Gideon disclosed that the artifact could effortlessly record both moving and still images, a capability far beyond common technology. Arthur's curiosity piqued. He pressed to know if that was the full extent of it. Vincent nodded, convinced it was solid proof, though Arthur remained skeptical. To him, such a device could have been manufactured by any skilled artificer on the Dicathan continent. The auction house owner cut in, reminding Arthur that he had already been introduced to the greatest artificer the continent had ever seen, none other than Gideon himself. Yet, Arthur continued to doubt Gideon's reputation, sowing seeds of tension. Snapping back, Gideon asserted that his very existence was proof there could be no secret artificer lurking behind the scenes as Arthur suggested. Arthur shot back with a cold logic, mocking the royal families for basing the existence of a second continent merely on Gideon's inability to decode the artifact. The inventor nodded in reluctant agreement and added a bombshell. The artifact had captured images from all three kingdoms, further complicating the mystery. Arthur's composed reaction to this revelation sent Gideon's temper flaring. He warned of the grave dangers posed by stronger, more advanced mages and inventors possibly residing on that distant continent. Arthur calmly acknowledged the risks but refused to indulge in hypotheticals. Instead, he was ready to prove or disprove the existence of this new land by unveiling the steam engine, a technological marvel that could change everything. Later that day, Vincent observed how genuinely happy Gideon seemed since receiving the blueprint. Even the auction house owner struggled to imagine a steam engine powerful enough to propel a large ship across the ocean. Arthur mused that it was only natural for people so dependent on mana to overlook the potential of technology. Vincent rambled on about his own frustrations, while Arthur's mind drifted, recalling how he could easily manipulate this seemingly harmless technology to bargain for a powerful weapon for his family. Suddenly, Sylvie messaged Arthur, letting him know she was coming to see him and Vincent, the big glasses boy. Elijah finished his shopping and reunited with the group, buzzing with anticipation for the upcoming unification announcement. Arthur was certain the unification was linked to the discovery of the second continent. Vincent acted as if he already knew the announcement's contents. Their conversation was abruptly cut short when Elijah spotted a violent scene unfolding nearby. A boy was violently shoved to the ground by a brutal kick, begging desperately for mercy. The bully was a cruel brat who openly despised dwarfs, mocking the boy for using mana to defend himself. He demanded the child immediately release his mana. When the boy refused, the punk started beating him with a pipe. Elijah sprang into action, tackling the assailant and rushing to aid the victim. The bully, unfazed, rose with a forehead as formidable as Mount Everest, slapping Elijah across the face and shoving his glasses askew. He seethed with annoyance that his fun had been interrupted. Vincent, the voice of reason, urged calling the guards before the situation escalated further. But Arthur seized Vincent's hand, halting him, burning with anger. Elijah was one of their own now, but using magic to intervene would put them all at risk. Arthur maintained an icy calm as one of the bullies recognized the Darv Kingdom symbol on Elijah's uniform. The gang was shocked to discover this connection, and the leader yanked Elijah's hair, sneering, "Jumping in to save one of your own?" Elijah was overwhelmed, unable to turn the tide in the fight, until Arthur silently appeared behind the bullies, wielding a pipe of his own. The gang's disbelief turned to dread as Arthur's determined stride signaled they were about to be rushed straight to the emergency via royal carriage. Meanwhile, Curtis lamented the need for such discretion while traveling without their parents. Their guard reassured him, insisting that with him around, nothing would go wrong. He was their ultimate protection. This secrecy was all to honor Princess Kathleen's wish to avoid drawing attention. Kathleen hadn't planned to attend at all, but had been drawn in by her brother's interest. Curtis marveled at the miracle of a girl like her surviving under the royal family's watch for so long. He teased that if not for him, she'd be locked in some dusty library all day. She snapped back, reminding him she was only his last option after a friend canceled. Curtis sighed, regretting leaving behind his rare lion mana beast bond, a giant creature nearly as large as the carriage and still untrained for the journey. Curtis sought Kathleen's approval for the journey, but she was distracted, her gaze locked on none other than Arthur. Back at the scene, Vincent's fear for the children's safety grew. He believed this was the day Arthur crossed a line, turning from protector to killer. Vincent stepped forward, trying to wrest control of the chaos. The bullies sneered, calling him an old fart, which only fueled his frustration. Here he was, risking everything to shield these kids, only to be insulted. Arthur calmly called Vincent's name, his smile innocent but dark, and asked him to step aside. A cold shiver ran down Vincent's spine as he reluctantly cleared the way, already resigned that these spoiled brats were about to meet their reckoning. The green-haired guy, eager to play hero, stepped up first, gripping a rusty pipe like it was Excalibur. But before he could make a move, Arthur struck with a blow so fierce it slammed into the guy's face, leaving the rest of the gang frozen in shock. Next up was the blonde, confident and cocky, wielding his family's signature sword technique like some heirloom weapon. He swaggered forward, eyes locked on Arthur as if this was going to be a show. Arthur, however, didn't blink. He tracked the boy's movements effortlessly, like reading an open book. The kid tried to trick him with a feint, then launched a lightning-fast lunge, aptly called an ultra-fast lunge strike, a painfully obvious name that sounded straight out of an anime tutorial. Arthur stood his ground and dodged the strike as if it were nothing, calm and fearless even at point-blank range. He stared down his opponent and with a casual flick, slapped the boy's back, snapping the pipe in his hand. Reinforcing the broken pipe with a pulse of mana, Arthur's confident sword, he was ready to finish this fight with his bare hands. The gang's leader sneered, calling Arthur cocky, but he had no idea what was coming next. Jamal, the leader, wasn't just any thug. He wielded a trident fist. His punches packed a power that far surpassed the average fighter. He stepped up, intending to remind Arthur exactly who was in charge. But when Arthur coolly advanced, locking eyes with icy blue that paralyzed Jamal with fear, the braggart realized this kid carried a pressure more crushing than his own father's reputation. Despite the terror gripping him, Jamal lunged forward, only to have Arthur land a crushing punch straight to his face. The impact was brutal enough to require plastic surgery. Jamal crashed to the ground, utterly beaten. Furious, Jamal rose, channeling magic into his attack, and unleashed it all at once. Just then, a shimmering icy shield erupted around Arthur and Vincent. A girl with flowing black hair stepped in to protect them, Princess Kathleen. Before the chaos continued, here's a glimpse into Kathleen's thoughts. To her, Arthur was just another boy, like her childish brother Curtis and his rowdy friends. At least, that's what she thought when they first met. But her gaze kept drifting back to Arthur, making her realize he wasn't like the immature boys she'd grown tired of. Arthur was different. Kathleen took a decisive step forward and froze everything around her. Curtis, not one to be outdone, also stepped forward, demanding to know what all the fuss was about. The bullies who had been tormenting Elijah quickly shrank back, fear overtaking their bravado. It wasn't long before they dropped to their knees, heads bowed, begging for mercy. In their defense, these scoundrels claimed they were just having a friendly chat until the barbaric peasant started attacking them out of nowhere. Elijah's patience snapped. Those lies infuriated him. Before he could speak, the loudest bully jumped in, insisting that he and his friends were the real victims. Meanwhile, Elijah helped the battered dwarf to his feet. Even Kathleen, known for her sharp eyes, could tell the bullies weren't telling the whole truth. The story didn't add up. The dwarf's injuries spoke louder than their words. But her brother Curtis wasn't as perceptive and quickly bought into the bully's tale. He turned to Arthur, interrogating him with pointed questions. Arthur wasn't here to entertain a fool who couldn't see through obvious lies. The bullies saw a flicker of hope when Arthur acted nonchalantly and arrogant toward the Prince of Suppin. They were certain Arthur was doomed. Just then, the escort knight stepped in, trying to stop Arthur from walking away after insulting the prince. But Arthur, unbothered, gripped the knight's filthy hand and apologized coldly and sharply. He made it clear his speech tended to get rough when provoked. The strength of Arthur's grip left the escort knight silently questioning his life choices. Before tensions could explode, Vincent stepped forward, offering a diplomatic olive branch. He apologized on Arthur's behalf, explaining they were simply passing through on their way to the plaza announcement when they stumbled upon a group of hooligans bullying the dwarf boy. To seal the truth, the battered dwarf coughed up blood, a stark reminder that he was seriously hurt. The prince, finally fed up, demanded the bullies' identities. The first to step forward introduced himself as Jamal, the firstborn son of House Trident. Hearing the name, the prince was momentarily stunned. Though Jamal had clearly been bullying the dwarf, the Trident family was a major benefactor to both the royal household and Xyrus Academy. The prince hesitated, unwilling to stir conflict with such influential allies. Meanwhile, Princess Kathleen already knew exactly how these bastards should be dealt with, but her brother cut her off. Contrary to her instincts, Curtis called for everyone to reconcile and move on, arguing no serious injuries or damage had been done. Jamal had predicted this outcome all along. His family's deep pockets made him practically untouchable. But Arthur wasn't about to let this slide. He turned to Uncle Vincent and asked if he still had the communication scroll. As soon as Arthur grabbed it, he wasted no time calling Cynthia Goodsky, director of Xyrus Academy. Jamal thought Arthur was a joke for dragging the academy director into this petty mess. Cynthia initially sounded annoyed, assuming it was Vincent calling her again, but the moment she realized it was Arthur on the line, her tone softened, even flirtatious, leaving everyone standing behind Arthur utterly bewildered. Arthur didn't hesitate. He told his old friend to expel Jamal Trident and his cronies from the academy for racial bullying and using lethal magic within city limits. The criminals visibly flinched, terrified of the consequences. Cynthia calmly asked what exactly Jamal had done. For a moment, Jamal dared to hope that Cynthia would protect him, despite Arthur's close ties to the academy director. No way would she side with a peasant like Arthur over her family's biggest donors. But Arthur wasn't done yet. He subtly threatened that he might reconsider joining the academy himself. That was all it took. The old woman immediately fell in line and issued an expulsion order on the spot. Jamal and his gang were officially kicked out. Later, the prince personally approached Arthur to apologize for his earlier behavior, admitting it was unbecoming of a prince to be swayed so easily. Arthur, in turn, apologized for letting his emotions get the better of him. Surprisingly, the prince didn't mind. He respected Arthur for standing his ground. House Trident or not, the prince was just relieved those troublemakers wouldn't be attending Xyrus Academy anymore. After the tense confrontation, the prince returned to his sister's side inside the carriage. As he settled into his seat, he muttered under his breath, "Arthur really is a strange kid. No doubt he's got a good heart, but there's something off about him." His sister, however, seemed completely unfazed by his musing. Without warning, she rose and casually invited Arthur to join her for tea once they met again at school. Arthur, with no reason to refuse, simply nodded and accepted the invitation. Behind him, Elijah couldn't help but feel a flicker of jealousy. After all, the princess herself had extended the invitation. Even her brother looked dumbfounded, stunned to see his usually cold and distant sister take such an interest in someone. By now, a massive crowd had gathered, buzzing with anticipation for the big announcement about to unfold. Thousands of eyes were fixed on the plaza, where the revelation of another continent awaited. Arthur's mind, however, was clouded by unease. The fact that this other continent had been covertly spying on Dicathan, using camouflaging mana beasts and recording artifacts, was troubling. They wouldn't resort to such measures unless they feared Dicathan's power or harbored deeply malicious intentions. Doubts gnawed at Arthur. Had he done the right thing by accelerating ability to reach this unknown land? Maybe it was for the best. If those strangers truly were hostile, perhaps Dicathan needed the chance to strike first with a preemptive attack. His dark thoughts were interrupted by his mother, who had noticed his distant mood. Concerned, she looked at him with gentle eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. Arthur quickly reassured her. "I'm fine." She smiled warmly, replying, "I'll always worry about you, but I'll never stop you from chasing what you want." Though Arthur wished he could promise never to give her cause for worry again, he knew the truth too well. So instead, he returned her smile and thanked her sincerely for her concern. Then several mages stepped forward and raised their hands, weaving magic to conjure a massive holographic screen above the crowd. Everyone's gaze was drawn upward to the regal figure of King Glader as he began his address. After introducing the other dignitaries standing beside him, he finally announced the reason everyone had gathered. Many of you know the history, the animosity that has long divided humans and elves. Even the dwarves have been seen mostly as business partners, rather than allies. His voice carried the weight of years of tension. "But this is not the future we want." He explained how he and the leaders of the various races had met repeatedly over recent years, striving to unify their peoples. 2 years prior, they took a major step by allowing members of all three races to become adventurers together. It brought a smile to his face to see human, elven, and dwarven parties working side by side toward common goals. Last year, another milestone was reached when Xyrus Academy opened its doors to students from the kingdoms of Elenwar and Dar, ushering in a new generation of mages free from the outdated barriers that had once kept them apart. As a leader, he acknowledged that adjusting after years of hostility wouldn't be easy for everyone. Still, he emphasized, the time had come to leave past grudges and discrimination behind. Thinking beyond narrow perspectives isn't just necessary for individual growth, he declared. It's vital for the future of this continent and all the children who will inherit it. The crowd responded with visible support, many nodding and murmuring their agreement. Next came King Aldwin of the Elves, stepping forward to deliver his speech. He expressed deep honor at speaking on such a historic day, echoing King Glader's vision for unity. But Aldwin also reminded everyone that the continent of Dicathan still held many mysteries and dangers, places so perilous no one dared explore them. What if, he wondered aloud, even greater mysteries and threats lie beyond our borders? With a solemn tone, Aldwin announced the discovery of evidence confirming another continent's existence. The crowd erupted in excitement, voices rising in frenzy. Arthur had expected this reaction from the common folk, but the Elf King quickly calmed the masses. "Even we don't know much yet," he cautioned. "There are many questions left unanswered. What we do know is that beyond lies a land filled with mystery, adventure, and possibly danger." He added that there was even evidence the other continent had attempted to reach Dicathan, but that current technology on both sides prevented successful travel. Then the Dwarven King rose to speak, commanding silence. As Aldwin said, much is unknown, he agreed. But in these uncertain times, one truth is clear: standing together as one people is what's best for Dicathan and its future. He warned that infighting among their own kind was pointless. Though our appearances and cultures may differ, we all share the same home, this continent of Dicathan. And for that, I am proud. He asked the crowd if they felt the same, and after a brief pause, the crowd burst into applause, their support unmistakable. To shepherd this new era of unity, 6 individuals will be appointed, chosen by the royal families for their courage, wisdom, tact, and strength. These 6 would represent the 3 races on a continental scale, tasked with defending Dicathan's well-being and working closely with the rulers to protect their shared home. From this day forward, they will be known as the 6 Lances, each symbolizing the unity between their kingdoms and the continent itself. Each lance-bearer was presented with a special ring, marking their title and authority across Dicathan. The names were announced: Aat Triskin, Vari Ori, Alred Warren, Agafin, Marthborn, and finally, Baron Wykes. The last name sent a jolt through the crowd. Elijah was caught completely off guard. Even Arthur's expression darkened. A thick tension filled the air as eyes shifted toward the stage. Seeing a member of the Wykes family present on such a day felt like a harsh reality check. Lucas Wykes, The traitor whose rebellion and betrayal had cost the lives of most of their party had leveraged his family's power and influence to walk free. Arthur had been warned. Seeking revenge against Lucas was suicide. Behind Lucas stood his older brother, a powerful mage and one of the 6 lances. This complicated Arthur's plans considerably, but he pushed those thoughts aside. There were more urgent matters at hand, like preparing for his sister's birthday. Arthur was ready to look every inch the gentleman for the occasion. When Sylvie tried to accompany him, he told her firmly to stay in her room for the night. There might be watchful guests at Ellie's birthday party, and he didn't want to risk drawing any unnecessary attention. Arthur reassured his little buddy with a warm smile, promising he'd make sure someone brought back plenty of food for her. That simple promise was enough to lift the child's spirits, and with cheerful waves, they parted ways. The mansion buzzed with energy as the night grew lively and guests arrived in droves. Arthur could be seen stationed by the front door, greeting each newcomer with quiet courtesy. Meanwhile, Elijah found himself tucked away in a corner, chatting up an attractive girl. Seizing the moment, he nervously invited her to grab lunch later, but his usual clumsy charm betrayed him. He ended up spilling his drink all over his clothes. The girl didn't waste time creating some distance, leaving Elijah red-faced and embarrassed. Arthur, noticing from nearby, quickly spun around to avoid locking eyes with his friend, knowing it would only deepen the poor guy's humiliation. Finally, the highlight of the evening arrived. Eleanor entered the room, her mother playfully covering her eyes as they walked in together. Once they reached the living room, her mother whisked her hand away, revealing the room filled with family and dear friends gathered to celebrate Eleanor's special day. Her brother seized the moment, stepping forward to ask Eleanor for a dance. She blinked in surprise, caught completely off guard by his unexpected invitation. Their father quickly gave the signal, ordering the musicians to fill the room with rhythm. As the music swelled, the siblings moved together, their dance a stunning display that captivated every guest. The room buzzed with admiration, their graceful steps weaving a story of sibling affection and pride. Amid the celebrations, an unexpected figure appeared, Gideon. Even here, the meticulous artificer couldn't resist discussing serious business with Arthur. The scene then shifted outside, where a grand carriage, dripping with royal flair, pulled up. Tesha remained inside, choosing not to steal the spotlight on Eleanor's big day. Instead, she instructed a servant to deliver a gift and quietly slipped away, letting the evening belong to the birthday girl. Back inside, Arthur and Gideon slipped aside for a private conversation. Arthur hoped Gideon hadn't crashed the party just to talk shop, but Gideon denied it immediately, mentioning he'd even brought a gift for Eleanor. With a weary sigh, Arthur asked what business the #1 artificer of Kathleen had with him tonight. Gideon's usual scowl deepened as he explained that the council had approved the refined blueprint he presented and construction was already underway. By the way, Gideon added, the kings and queens of Kathleen had all agreed to drop their old monarch titles and now preferred to call themselves the council. Arthur congratulated him, acknowledging that Gideon's work deserved every bit of praise and reward. But Gideon's eyes gleamed with a deeper desire, something the council could never provide. Just then, Gideon's fans swarmed around him, completely monopolizing his attention and leaving Arthur alone with his thoughts. That's when Lilia came rushing up, breathless from sprinting all the way over and apologizing for being late. Arthur smiled warmly, saying it was no problem and mentioning he'd already heard from her parents about how busy she'd been lately as secretary of the student council. Setting aside formalities, Arthur greeted her properly, delighted at how much time had passed since their last meeting. As they stood face to face, Lillian noticed how much taller he'd grown. They caught up, and Arthur found himself genuinely pleased to see how far she'd come. The little girl who once hid from her parents and shared meals only with maids and butlers had blossomed into a confident, accomplished young woman. Lilia feigned annoyance, suspecting Arthur was teasing her for once revealing her secret hiding spot, but he couldn't resist pointing out how far she'd come. The girl who once fretted endlessly about her future was now thriving at the most prestigious academy in Kathleen. Judging by the number of boys who had been sneaking glances her way, Arthur guessed she'd become quite popular too. Lilia, caught off guard, unintentionally slipped up and admitted she didn't even have a boyfriend yet. Arthur, oblivious to the hint, cheerfully offered to vet and approve any potential suitors she might bring home, though he warned he'd be just as tough as her father. The idea devastated Lilia. To think Arthur didn't see her as anything more than a friend was heartbreaking. Just then, Gideon joined their conversation. Lilia quickly bowed respectfully to her senior and excused herself, leaving Arthur and Gideon alone. Gideon observed Arthur's seeming magnetism with girls, especially how Lilia appeared interested in him. He asked if Arthur planned to act on it. Arthur replied plainly that Lilia's feelings were more gratitude than love. She saw him as a hero who'd change her life. For now, it was infatuation, like a damsel's crush on her champion. Someday she'd understand the difference. Gideon found Arthur's deep analysis annoyingly clinical, but Arthur was sure Gideon hadn't come to talk about romance. So he asked what he really wanted. Gideon confessed he wished to leverage the money, fame, and power the council had granted him to obtain something priceless, Arthur's knowledge. Arthur's unease deepened. He'd begun second-guessing giving Gideon the steam engine blueprints, not wanting to upset the world's delicate balance further. This continent was doing just fine without him meddling. Hearing this, Gideon only grew more convinced Arthur had other inventions in mind, world-changing ideas he simply refused to share. Arthur frowned at how selectively Gideon heard only what suited him. He cut him off coldly, making clear he wouldn't indulge selfish curiosity. In response, Gideon proposed a deal. He wouldn't pry into any of Arthur's inventions if Arthur allowed him to borrow his mind from time to time. In exchange, Gideon would become Arthur's personal benefactor, providing any artifacts or goods he needed. The offer was tempting, and Arthur saw no reason to refuse. With a nod, they shook hands, sealing their agreement. Meanwhile, Ellie happily tore into the pile of presents she'd received. Among the sea of gifts, Arthur noticed one oddly shaped package standing out. Ellie quickly unwrapped it and found a letter tucked inside. Arthur read it quietly as Ellie pulled out a finely crafted bow and arrows, their design unmistakably elven. Though Arthur had no clue who the sender might be, it was clear to the reader. It was from Tesha. Ellie then extended her hand, demanding Arthur hand over her gift. Without hesitation, Arthur produced 2 small jewelry boxes, one for his sister and one for their mother, ready to share the celebration. As Ellie carefully opened the gift, her eyes lit up. It was the very same phoenix feather necklace Arthur had received from Gideon. These necklaces were no mere trinkets. They were powerful protective charms, meant to shield the wearer if Arthur or their father were ever absent. Mrs. Hella gasped in awe at such a lavish item, while her husband casually noted that these 2 pendants were the only ones in existence. Gently, Arthur placed one pendant around his sister's neck, greeting her with a heartfelt, "Happy birthday." Later, the scene shifted to the council's manufacturing facility, a place strictly off-limits except to council members. Yet Arthur walked through with rare privilege, accompanied by Gideon as they exchanged conversations along the way. Gideon suddenly remembered that Arthur's birthday had passed not long ago. It had been 4 months since Ellie's birthday, and the days seemed to blur together in the rush of events. Still, despite the delay, Gideon presented Arthur with a gift. Arthur opened the box carefully and found exactly what he'd hoped for, a long-awaited treasure. With genuine gratitude, he thanked his eccentric friend. Gideon, however, downplayed the gesture. Compared to Arthur's assistance with the steam engine, this present was nothing. Then, teasing, Gideon asked why Arthur had hidden not 1, but 2 elemental attributes. With a smirk, he joked whether Arthur was secretly a quadra-elemental mage. That joke hit a little too close to home. Arthur actually was a quadra-elemental mage. Gideon nearly choked upon hearing this revelation, his mind racing as the pieces clicked into place. The bracelet's purpose was clear now. It was meant to conceal half of Arthur's elemental powers. Why reveal the secret now? Gideon wondered aloud. Arthur, unfazed, admitted that the more Gideon understood how special he was, the more likely he'd be to provide freebies. Despite his nonchalance, Gideon still found the secret world-defying and demanded proof. Arthur, confident, promised he would prove himself when the time came. Walking through the facility, Arthur was genuinely impressed by the speed at which the steamship was coming together. Gideon smiled, predicting that by the time Arthur cheerfully marched off to his first day of school, the Decus would already be setting sail. Alone, Arthur reflected on just how fast the old genius worked. Organizing and building an entire steam-powered ship in mere months was nothing short of astonishing. If this new continent truly was as hostile as rumored, Arthur couldn't afford to train half-heartedly. With the artifact Gideon had given him, he resolved to bring his wind and earth magic closer in strength to his already formidable fire and water powers. Lost in thought, Arthur accidentally bumped into a large man accompanied by two women. Recognizing the man as a low-life extra, Arthur tried to brush past, but the man wouldn't relent. He even grabbed Arthur by the head. Arthur was willing to ignore the taunts, but the disrespect of having his head grabbed was unacceptable. With a deadly glare, Arthur made the man recoil in fear. Serious annoyance filled Arthur as he realized this guy dared speak to a professor of Zurn's academy that way. The mention of professor made Arthur pause, but the man continued to mock Arthur, flaunting his title. In response, Arthur tossed down a pendant he'd quietly taken from the man. The bastard was utterly dumbfounded. He hadn't even seen the brat move, yet somehow the pendant was gone. Later at home, Arthur was greeted by his sister and the little furball, who both jumped on him. Quickly saving himself, he used wind magic to gently float them away, buying space. He asked where their parents were, and Ellie explained they were in the living room with Elijah, having received packages from Zyrus Academy, one for Elijah, one for Arthur. The box holding Arthur's official uniform symbolized a new chapter: an orphan, a king's son, a baby, an adventurer, now a student. The significance wasn't lost on him. How much more would this world teach him? This is the end of Season 2, Part 1 of this series. If you want us to cover Part 2, please mention Tbate in the comments down below. Thank you all for your incredible support to the channel. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing. It really helps us grow and bring more exciting stories to you. We'll be back soon with even more thrilling episodes. Until then, stay awesome, stay safe, and cheers.